Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining in and welcome to this workshop on AWS Certified Machine Learning Specialty. Now, the key agenda of this session is to make you aware of the expectation of this AWS Certified Machine Learning Certification examination, and also we will see as how we can perform the machine learning on one of the most used service in AWS, that's the AWS SageMaker. So that would be the agenda, guys. So it's a hands-on session. Now, in order to follow along with me, so I'll be sharing you all the steps that you need to do. Yeah, and wherever you have got a question, you can feel free to let me know. You can feel free to ask me the questions related to data science, machine learning, and AWS, which are specific to this session, and I'll do my best to answer any of the queries that you might have. And if you have attempted the examination and or if you're planning to attempt the examination and if you're looking for any other questions that you might have got during your preparation, feel free to let me know as well. I'll do my best to provide the input so that you can clear your examination in the first attempt. Okay, so that would be the overall agenda. So we'll look into the expectation of this examination and then we will look into the hands-on with performing the machine learning with AWS. Now, some of these services are paid, so ensure that you create your free tier account. And I think if you create a free tier account, most of these services will also be part of the free tier account. You'll get like few months of trial access. Okay, with that said, guys, so let's proceed ahead in today's learning agenda. Now, before we proceed ahead, guys, I want to know from you what is your experience level in AWS Cloud? So, what is your experience level in the AWS Cloud? You can let me know whether you have worked in the AWS Cloud or if it is something new to you, you can let me know as well. So, please let me know in the Q&A or the chat window. So it would be beneficial so that I can tailor the session, which will be helpful for most of the audience. Okay. Okay, I can see the responses right now. So Rakshita says very new to AWS, have cleared the foundation certification. Okay, that's great. What about okay, Ramya says like preparing for the architect level. Okay, Sachin says no experience. Rajiv says no experience. And okay, Raghu says have got 5 years experience in AWS. That's great. Ramya is very new to the AWS. Okay, and uh, okay, and Sridhar says I'm planning for preparing now. I do not have any other background. Okay, that's great. Okay, Samiksha says I'm new to this AWS. Okay, Sai Sankalp says have got 1 year of experience with AWS. Okay, amazing guys, and thank you for your response. And I see Shruti. Shruti says I've got I'm working in AWS as a developer, but since I'm switching the role, I'm planning to take this examination. Okay, that's great, guys. So let me tell you one important thing. Okay, if you want to take this AWS machine learning certification examination, there are no prerequisites, which means there are no prerequisites saying that you have to prepare or clear one examination, then only you'll be able to appear for this specialty. So you can directly appear for this certified machine learning specialty if you're comfortable and if you're comfortable with this AWS cloud. So that's one thing. And I myself have cleared the certified machine learning specialty first and then started clearing the other examination. So I actually had to take the certification first, the specialty certification first for the work purpose, and then I started clearing the other certification. So to confirm, guys, there are no prerequisites. Okay, there are no prerequisites of other certification to be able to appear for this AWS certified machine learning specialty examination. Now, once this question is answered, we'll take a look into the examination pattern, and we'll also look into the expectation of this AWS certified machine learning specialty. Now, when we talk about the expectation of this AWS certified machine learning specialty. So this is the official page of AWS. So first things first, yeah, the cost of this examination is 300 US dollars. You'll get 180 minutes, and there is a trick I'm sure everyone might be aware. So once you log into the examination portal, so you can if you select as non-English speaker, you can actually get 60 minutes of additional time. So you can consider it as 180 plus 60, you'll get the 60 minutes of additional time if you select it as the non-English speaker. Now coming to the examination guide. So here AWS clearly describes what kind of services that are expected in the examination. Some of the uh, some of the recommendations by the AWS clearly states is that it recommends that you have at least 2 years of hands-on experience in developing, architecting, and running the machine learning or deep learning workloads in the AWS cloud. So overall, the expectation from the AWS is not just the experience, but your familiarity in using the AWS services in implementing the solutions for your customer, that is by using the machine learning and deep learning. And you should be comfortable in expressing the intuition behind basic ML algorithm, because more than 35% of your questions will be around intuition behind this machine learning algorithms. Like for example, if I have some kind of hyperparameters, what happens if I increase that hyperparameter value, and what happens if I decrease the hyperparameter value, and and if I have a recall value as 30%, what does it actually signify? So you should be able to explain, or at least you should be having a high level idea about those machine learning algorithms. It is very much important. Since the examination is around the machine learning, you should be comfortable in explaining the intuition behind that basic machine learning algorithm. So you're not expected to explain the intuition behind transformers. That's not the expectation. You need to have an intuition behind basic ML algorithms and experience in performing the basic hyperparameter tuning optimization, which means you should be aware what are the hyperparameter optimization technique like grid search CV, random search CV, and what is the difference between them, and what kind of strategies that you can use it while performing the hyperparameter tuning. So that's the expectation. And another one is experience with ML and deep learning frameworks. That is, you should be familiar in applying the machine learning or deep learning on a given data set. Okay, so there is no hands-on code about how do you code it with TensorFlow library or PyTorch library. There's no code related question, but remember it's a conceptual related question. And you should be able to follow the model training, deployment, and operational best practices. So as you can clearly see, this is a special kind of examination, I would say, because here you are being tested upon the machine learning, and more specifically how you can perform this machine learning on the AWS cloud. So that's a key things that you need to remember when we talk about the certification. Now let's take a deep dive into this document. We'll spend around 10-15 minutes around this, and I'll talk about the important topics that you need to focus on when you are appearing for the examination. And then we'll take up the hands-on on one of the important topic which has been highlighted right here as well. That is, how do you perform the machine learning using the AWS services? Okay, so if you take a look into this document, so this is the official document that is shared by AWS. So let me share you the link over here in the chat window. I highly recommend you to download it and keep it with you. The reason because your preparation should be around this particular document. So AWS would keep on updating the document to ensure that you are in line with the expectation by the AWS team. It is recommended that you keep this document handy and refer to it as much as possible. Now, by referring continuously in the hand by referring continuously, you will be confident that your preparation will be in line with the AWS. Okay, now if you check, it just mentions the same thing. Some of the target audiences who will be the right person for the AWS. So recommended AWS knowledge. So remember, these are all just a recommendation. It's not mandatory, but it will definitely be helpful if you're someone who is very new. So experience in basic hyperparameter optimization, ML and deep learning framework, ability to follow the model training best practices, deployment best practices, operational best practices. So they have clearly mentioned what is the knowledge that is out of scope for the target candidate. So obviously, you don't have to develop the extensive or complex algorithm. You don't have to perform the extensive hyperparameter optimization that is out of scope, and you don't have to write the mathematical calculation or solve something in hand, and there's no expectation of you performing the advanced networking and network design, which is part of the other certification, and there's no requirement that okay, you should be uh, well versed with database or DevOps concept, and there's no mandate that you should be able to perform the EMR task like DevOps related EMR. So all these are not expected, it's out of scope for the target candidate. So what you are expected is the basic idea about all these things. You don't have to be master about all these things, just a basic idea around it. And the examination pattern, just like any AWS examination, even here you can expect two kinds of question. One is multiple choice and the another one is multiple response. So multiple choices, like it will have a single correct answer, or the another kind of question is, which could be a trickier one for most of the folks, it's the multiple response where a single question have got multiple correct responses. So it can have two or more than two correct responses for the given question. Okay, and here when you come over here, okay, so the overall examination results will be between 100 to 1000. So another key thing that you need to remember is here, just like any AWS examination, you will not come to know which question carries which weightage or how much weightage. So that is not shared to us. So which means when you're attempting the examination, you have to answer as much questions as possible. Okay, you have to answer as much questions as possible so that overall your score will be able to cross the minimum passing score of 750. Okay, once you complete the examination, you'll be able to see the result and you get to see what is the overall outcome of your examination. So here, this AWS certification examination, which is the machine learning track, they have divided this overall examination preparation into four domains. So your preparation should be within and should be around these four domains. So the domain one is about the data engineering. Now in this domain one, so you are expected to learn the topics related to the data engineering. We'll take a deeper dive into these domains. Okay, but if I want to talk at a very high level, this data engineering domain covers 20% of your examination content. And the second domain, which is an important one from the perspective of machine learning, that is the EDA, exploratory data analysis. And this will have 24% of the scored content. And domain 3 is 36%, which is about modeling, the intuition behind the machine learning models, and it carries 36% of the weightage. And the domain 4, which is about the machine learning implementation, it actually holds 20% of the scored content. You can clearly see if you are a machine learning practitioner or if you are aware of the data science, okay, I can say that you would have already covered. So if you just do a quick addition, to up to 80% of your examination preparation is already done. If you're someone who's working in the data science field for more than a year, or even if you have just started out in the learning journey, if you have worked in an end-to-end project, you would have covered 80% of the examination syllabus. So remember, you need to have just intuition behind it. That is more than enough for you to proceed ahead and for you to confidently appear in the examination. Now that this four parts is clear, let's take a look into the domains, each and every individual domain that we have got. So the domain one, it's about the data engineering. For starters, like for the folks who are new to the data science or the folks who have just started their learning journey, you might be wondering, why should I know about the data engineering? Well, data engineering is one of the important aspect in any machine learning project because using this data engineering, okay, with using this data engineering, we get to prepare the data in a required manner. So before we actually get that CSV file, there's a lot of things that happens in the backend where we extract the data from various sources and we perform some kind of concatenation, transformation. We'll drop some columns, we'll check some important validations in our data, and then the data gets stored inside a data lake. That means it's a central place where every data of my organization will be stored. And from the data lake, as a data science or a machine learning practitioner, you get a CSV file and you will start working. So that means that data engineering is one of the crucial prerequisite for working in any machine learning project. So considering its importance, 20% of its weightage in the examination has been given to this data engineering topic. And if you look into the perspective about the kind of skill set that is expected is, so you should be familiar with creation of the data repositories for machine learning project. That means how do you create the data? How do you store the data? Now, specifically to the AWS, we have various storage services. We've got S3, we've got file system, we have got EBS, we have got databases. So there are various systems that we have got, and these systems are available for us to store the data. Okay, and you should be in a point or you should be in a place to determine which storage location is suitable for me for the type of task that I'm trying to perform. So that is your task 1.1. And your second task is identify and implement the data ingestion solution. Now, when I say identifying and implementing the data ingestion solution, here machine learning is all about using the data and performing some kind of a transformation, isn't it? Now, before that happens, you have to store the data. When you are receiving the data from multiple sources, you have to store it in a way such that it is easier to consume. And that is where the data ingestion solution would come into picture. So here, as part of this task 1.2, the key expectations are you should be aware of the various services, especially in the data ingestion in AWS, like the Amazon Kinesis, Kinesis Data Firehose, EMR, Glue, managed service for Apache Flink. So these are the important services that you need to be aware of so that you will be comfortably able to orchestrate the data ingestion pipeline. It can be the batch-based machine learning workflow, or it can be for the streaming-based machine learning workload. And the task 1.3 says is that you have to identify and implement the data transformation solution. So when we say data transformation, once you load the data, once you combine the data from various sources, how do you transform the data in transit? So there are various services that we have to transform the data in transit. That means before it gets saved in your S3 bucket or in your storage repository, maybe we want to transform on the fly before it gets saved. And here to do that, we have various services in AWS like the ETL, Glue, EMR, Batch. So all these services are there for us to perform this data transformation. And also how you will be able to handle the ML specific data using the Hadoop MapReduce. In this case, the Apache Hadoop, Spark, and Hive. So how you can handle that ML specific data using MapReduce. So all these, if you're able to come, if you're comfortable in completing these tasks, I would say you are done with the preparation for the domain one, that is data engineering. Okay, then you've got the domain 2. The domain 2 is, I would say, it's very much easier if you're someone who is aware of the basic workflow of machine learning. Now, as a person who has worked in this domain, so if you have worked in machine learning algorithm or loaded the data for your working, then if you look into the task, it will be very much similar to the day-to-day task that you generally do. Like if you look into the task 2.1, it says that you'll have to identify and handle the missing data. So you'll not be expected to write the code for handling the missing data, but more specifically, what is a strategy that you can take when you have got missing data, or when you have a corrupt data or the stop words? So what are the strategies that you would take? And what are the strategies that are available to format, normalize, augment, and scale the data? Now, when you say scaling the data, there are various scalars, isn't it? Min max scaler, standard scaler, depending on the type of data, you'll be applying the same. And to augment the data, there are various algorithms that we have got to generate new data set from the existing data. And you should be able to determine whether there is a sufficient label data or not. And when it is not there, how would you go ahead and increase the data volume? Like how do you balance the data set, and what are the functionalities that are available in AWS? Like for example, there's Amazon Mechanical Turk. So you should be aware of these terminologies, and the examination asks around the same. Like they'll give you a question based on the use case. They'll give you a question saying as there's a company called ABC company, and they want to implement a specific or a certain workload. Now, for that certain workload, they are looking for a specific storage location, storage service. Now, what kind of storage service do you recommend for this given task or for this given scenario? So, as you can clearly see, like the examination that I've clearly mentioned, so it will be based on the use case. So it is recommended that you are familiar with such use cases. Then, like when you say use cases, to answer it, obviously you need to be confident about those services in a detailed manner. And the second task is feature engineering. So what are the ways in which that you would identify and extract the features from the given data set? Like text, speech, image, public data set. When you have got those various kinds of data, okay, so what strategies that you can use it? Okay, what strategies that you can use it in order to go ahead and like apply such strategies, guys. Okay, so that's the expectation. How do you approach the data set, like perform the feature engineering? How do you evaluate the feature engineering concept, like how to perform the tokenization, outlier analysis, smooth technique and generation of the synthetic features for the given data set, and here one hot encoding, reducing the dimensionality of the data set. So these are the topics that you need to be aware from the feature engineering standpoint. And coming to the task 2.3, it's about analyzing and visualizing the data for machine learning. So you should be having a high level idea about what kind of graph that you would prefer when you're working with the data set. Do you prefer the scatter plot, time series data, histogram chart, or box plot? And the other questions is around how do you interpret the descriptive statistics? Okay, so how do you go ahead and uh, like interpret the descriptive statistics and so on? So basically, it's about the what kind of plot do you use depending on the scenario. Okay, and then this is about like how some basic concepts around the hypothesis testing. How do you interpret the value of P, and how would you go ahead and perform the unsupervised learning, like the cluster analysis? So hierarchical clustering, elbow plot, cluster size. So these are the key concepts that you need to be aware of. So you can say that the EDA chapter or EDA domain is composed of exploring the data set and performing the analysis at a very high level using the statistics concept. Okay, then the domain 3 is about the machine learning, sorry, the modeling. So here the questions will be around as if you have got the certain kind of data set, okay, if you have got a certain kind of data set, the questions will be around which model is suitable for that certain kind of data set. Okay, so that's about the domain 3 modeling. And so here it's about how do you choose the appropriate model for the given data set. Like there, you should be aware of the basic ideology behind the algorithms like XGBoost, logistic regression, K-means, linear regression, decision trees, random forest, RNN, CNN, ensemble learning, transfer learning. So these are the techniques that you need to be aware of, and then the training of such model and evaluation of such model, and also the idea behind this hyperparameter optimization. And the last domain is about how would you log and monitor the AWS environment, obviously the CloudWatch, working with the Docker containers. What are the key strategies, the high level idea that you need to remember when you're thinking about productionalizing your machine learning models, and some of the machine learning on AWS services like Poly, Lex, Transcribe, and understanding the service quotas, and how do you think about the infrastructure like using the spot instances. And those are the key concepts that you need to be aware of when it comes to the preparation of this overall domain 4. So as you can clearly see, so this certification, even though it's specific, even though we call it as even though we call it as an AWS certification, you will be tested upon applying the machine learning using the AWS services. So that's the importance of these preparation. Like that's the importance of these the machine learning in this certification examination, guys. Okay. Now this was about going through the high level overview of these 4 domains. Now I want to ask from you, do you have any questions or any queries from the examination pattern that we have just discussed? Please let me know, guys. So I've now logged into my AWS account. Here we'll be starting one of the service that's called as a Amazon SageMaker service. Now this is one of the crucial part for your certification preparation. So I'll take you through some of the basics of working with this Amazon SageMaker service and how do you get started with this Amazon SageMaker. Now, if I come to this getting started page of this Amazon SageMaker, it basically tells me what exactly is a SageMaker. Now, the SageMaker is a fully managed machine learning service. So, with the help of this service, we as a data scientist and the developers, we can quickly start building the model, training the model, and even deploy the machine learning models into a production ready hosted environment. The best part is it provides the user interface experience for running the machine learning workflows so that we can make use of the various machine learning tools that we have got. And it actually provides the IDE, guys. So what I'll do is to simply get started, it will take a while for us to get the domain. So what I'll do is to simply get started, first I'll set up my SageMaker, and then by the time it loads, I'll provide you some more information. Now, in order to get started in this Amazon SageMaker service, the first thing that you need to do is you need to create a domain. I'll say create domain. Now, when we are creating the domain, we've got two options. One is set up for a single user or setting up for the organization. I'll select the first one since we are looking out for learning purpose. I'll click on setup. Okay, this is going to set up my SageMaker domain. And then here it would go ahead and instantiate the domain itself. See, it says a quick domain, quick setup domain. So it has started instantiating my SageMaker domain. So we need to wait for this domain to get started in order to create our own SageMaker notebook instance. Okay. In the meantime, let's explore the features of this SageMaker. So I've mentioned that it's a fully managed service. Now the best part is here we can actually work in the team as well. Like if I've got a team of data scientists who are working, we are actually able to work in a collaborative manner. And we can actually make use of the various machine learning algorithms that are actually part of the SageMaker, and we can make use of the models that are part of this SageMaker framework, or we can also bring our own model, custom model, whenever we are performing the training. Okay, and here they have actually separated everything. That means when I say separated everything, they have separated the notebook environment separate. That means that it can be running on a separate instance. I can perform a training on a separate instance, which I can instantiate it, and I can specify the configuration where that particular model has to be trained and on which instance. And when it comes to inference, I can deploy that model on the required instance. Suppose if my deployment is based on the machine learning model, then I can make use of the CPU based system. If it is based on the deep learning, maybe I can use the instance which has got the GPU support. So every flexibility would lie with us, and we can control everything inside the SageMaker environment itself. Okay, that's the benefit of working inside the SageMaker service. And this SageMaker service has got various tools that are available for us. Like all these tools are there for us to prepare the data, training the data, training the model, evaluating the model, and even when it comes to deployment. And since it's SageMaker, which is from AWS, so it has got the integrations with other AWS services, which means I can store the data inside an S3 bucket, and I can load the data into my SageMaker notebook. And once I have cleaned the data, I can save the clean data into my S3 bucket. And whatever the models that I'll create, maybe I can save it inside my artifact registry, or I can save the model inside my S3 bucket as well. And if when I'm performing the evaluation, if I want to save the evaluation results, I can track it and I can push the data to my S3 bucket. So since this SageMaker is there for us, like since it is integrated with other services, it is easier for us to build the fully managed solution for us, and it will be easier for us to build the overall solution. So those are the advantages that we are going to get. Okay, now let me come to the domain and see the status. Okay, it's still in pending status. Okay, so once the domain is in service, okay, now it is in service, what you need to do is you need to select a user. So it has already created the user, and inside this user I'll go ahead and launch the development environment. I'm going to start the development environment of Jupyter Lab. I'll click on the studio. So this is going to start the SageMaker Studio. So which basically a level above the Jupyter Lab, you can say. Okay, this is my SageMaker Studio. And here we've got various applications that I can run. I've got the code editor, I've got the Jupyter Lab and everything. So for now, I'll start this Jupyter Lab application. Okay, here I'll say create Jupyter Lab space. This is going to start a Jupyter Lab space where I'll get the notebook environment. I'll say my notebook, create space. So here, when we are creating the space, we can actually configure what type of instance that we want to use. So I'll use the ml.t3.medium and image. So I'll use the one that is provided for me, which is the default. And once we create it, I'll click on run space. So this is going to run this SageMaker notebook space. Okay, now apart from this, here in this SageMaker Studio, we've got other capabilities as well. We've got data. We can use this data. Under this data, we've got data wrangler, feature store, and EMR cluster. We can use this for exploring the data and performing the data transformations around here. And we can use the feature store to store and share the features across multiple projects. And we have got EMR cluster in order to compute the clusters for the batch work. And we have got AutoML where we can use this functionality to automatically build a model, train and evaluate it. We have got jobs to monitor our training and evaluation jobs. We can build a pipeline. We can look into the saved models over here. And there is also something called as Jumpstart, where we can make use of the already created model and get started with our deployment. So for now, I'll click on home and I'll come back to my Jupyter lab. And this is the Jupyter lab that I have already started. I'll click on this open. So this is going to launch the uh, Jupyter Lab interface for me where we can start working, guys. Okay, so the Jupyter Lab interface that we would get. So here the computation is powered by AWS instance that we had created earlier. Then in our case, that is ml.t3 media. So that's the instance that is powering this Jupyter Lab session. Here we can quickly get started and start working with our notebook. I can start with Python 3 or Glue, PySpark, and Ray. I can select whichever is the one that I want to run. So for simplicity, I'll start the Python 3 notebook, and you can clearly see that here the interface is very much similar to the one that we generally use it in our local system, isn't it? So I'll create a new notebook as my first notebook. I'll save this. Now we can get started and start working with this, working inside this Jupyter Lab environment, guys. So now that we have this, let's go ahead and let's start by loading the data set. Let me just bring up the code that I have got. So the first thing that we have done is we have started our Jupyter Notebook instance. Now, once we have started our Jupyter Notebook instance, we'll start by downloading the data set and we'll explore and we'll transform the data. So here to get started, we need a data. So for the demonstration purpose, I'll make use of one of the inbuilt data set that is provided that's called as a adult census data set. And this is present as part of the SHAP library. So I'll say import SHAP. And once I import this SHAP, I can go ahead and get started over here. So I think I'll have to install this. I'll say pip install SHAP. So this is going to install the SHAP library for me. Then I'll say import SHAP. Then we will download the data set, which is the adult census data set as shap.datasets.adult. So this is going to download the data set. Now, once I download the data set, okay, I would go ahead and show you this data set itself. If I say X, so this is going to return me the data frame. See, this is how the data frame would look like. My X contains the various columns: age, work class, education, marital status, occupation. So these are the various columns that we have got as part of my X. And if I display the Y, so it contains true, false, and so on. So this is how the data would look like. Okay, now if I want to display my feature names, I can say x dot columns. So it just displays the various feature names that we have got. So as you can clearly see, let me just display the unique values of my y. So the unique values of my y is true or false. So if I've got unique values of x and y, so what is the type of task that we can perform? So what do you think the task that we are going to do here? So what is the task, guys? That's correct, Ramesh. That's correct, Kavya. Lata, correct. Sridhar, yes. What about others? What do you think is the type of task that we are going to do now? Rakshit, yes. Yes, as most of you have mentioned, since my target Y has got two unique values, okay, and which is categorical in nature, we call this task as a binary classification. So that means when I'm selecting the model, I should be selecting the model which is around the classification. Okay, so we are trying to predict whether it is true or false. Okay, so this is how the data would look like. So let us proceed ahead, guys. Here Once we can simply go ahead and perform some additional analysis. We can call the describe and look into the scale of my values. So each and every column in the data set, at least the describe is going to give me the overall information as a mean, standard deviation, minimum, a maximum, median, Q1 and Q3, all this information that we would get as a summary. So we can go ahead and apply the feature engineering in case if you are interested. For simplicity, I'll use the data as it is. Okay, I'll just use the data as it is. So once we load the data set, the next obvious step is split the data set into two parts. So in order to split the data set, I'll say from sklearn dot model underscore selection will import train test split. Now once I import this model, will once I import this function, I'll say xtrain comma xtest ytrain comma ytest is equal to train test split, and we'll just mention our x and y, and we can specify our test size. I'll say it as 0.2, and we can mention some random state. I'll say it as 1. So this will split the data set. And once I split the data, okay, it is test size. Okay, once I split the data, we can go ahead and uh, get started. Okay, so we have split the data set into two parts, training and the test. 80% of them is my training data and 20% of them is my test data. Now what I can do is I'll further split my training data into my training and the validation data. I'll say xtrain comma xval, ytrain comma yval, and I'll further split my xtrain that I've got. So that means I'll use my training data to further split into two parts. One, I'll keep it as my validation data, and another one, I'll keep it as my training data. Okay, so here I'm splitting in the ratio of 75-25. It is up to us in case if you do not want to mention it. Okay, this is how we are going to prepare the data set. Okay, now once this is done, we would go ahead and work with our data set. Okay, so let's do one thing, guys. So here, what we have is, okay, so what we have right now is we've got the features and we also have the target. Now, to get started, okay, so since we have prepared the data set and created into multiple parts, so we will save these data and we will export it into an S3 bucket, because that's one of the common activity that we do. Once we have pre-processed the data set, we would go ahead and save it into an external file for the later reference purpose. Now I have the X and Y separate. So I'll perform the concatenation of all these data set. Okay, so here the Y variable that you see right here, it basically tells us for the given family whether the income is more than 50K or not. Okay, if the income is greater than 50K, we have it as true, else it is false. So in order to do the same, so to combine everything, I'll write a code in this manner. I'm importing my pandas library. I'm concatenating the series that I've got with my xtrain, okay, and which means I'll be placing one next to each other. And I'm creating it as three different variable: train, validation, and test, which is the combination of xtrain, xtest, and xval that we had created earlier. Okay, so that is what I have done right here. Now, if you simply look into your train variable, I'll just display first few entries. So here you can see that we have the target column, which is income greater than 50K, which is my target column, and I have changed it into the integer so that we'll have it as 0 and 1 instead of the Boolean values. Then we have the feature values next to it. Now, once we have these, so we can go ahead and save these data into a CSV file. So I'll just go ahead and save this data into a CSV file by making use of two CSV function from our data frame and save it into the CSV file. Once I execute this, you can see that the two files have been generated, that is train.csv and validation.csv. Now, what we need to get is we need to save this data into an S3 bucket. Now, whenever we are starting the domain, so what happens in the backend is it will also create an S3 bucket for us. It will create a S3 bucket, which is a default S3 bucket, which will be used for our SageMaker service. So we can get that default S3 bucket, and we can actually get it by making use of the inbuilt library of SageMaker. And if I want to interact with the other AWS services, I can make use of the Python SDK that we have got, that is the Boto3 library. So let me just go ahead and import the same. I'll say import SageMaker, Boto3 and OS. Okay. Uh, so this is what I would go ahead and import it. Okay, now once it is imported, so next what I'll do is if I want to get my default S3 bucket, to get my default S3 bucket, we'll call it as SageMaker for my current session. To get my default bucket, I'll just have to call default bucket. If I call this default bucket, this is going to return me the default bucket name, which is this US East 1 followed by my account ID. And that's one of the S3 bucket that you see right here. So for this S3 bucket, I'm going to save the data that I have just exported into a CSV file. So let me just go ahead and do that using this understanding. So I'll mention as my bucket is equal to this. Okay, this is going to get my S3 bucket name, and I can add some prefix if I want. I'll say my demo. That's a prefix that I want to add. Okay. Now, in order to upload the data to my S3 bucket, I'll say boto3.session dot resource, and here I want to access the resource of this S3 and the bucket, and I'll mention my bucket name that I have got earlier. And here I want to upload the object, and the location of this object is os.path.join. Okay, and the location of the file. Okay, the way that I'll be specifying is prefix, the one that I mentioned earlier, followed by I'll mention as data slash train.csv. Okay, now once this is done, I'll say upload underscore file. Okay, and I want to upload the file, that is train.csv. So it means I want to upload the file, which is train.csv, into my S3 bucket, where the bucket name is the below one. Inside this bucket name, the path that I'm mentioning is prefix, that is my demo, followed by data slash train.csv. Okay, and for there I'm uploading the file, that is train.csv. Let me just go ahead and execute it. So this has been executed. Now if I go inside my S3 bucket, there should be a folder called my demo. Inside this folder, there's a data folder and there is a train.csv. So I have pushed the data into an S3 bucket, and I'll do the same thing for the another resource that I have got, which is basically my validation data. So bucket, instead of train.csv, it is validation.csv, and I want to upload this validation.csv. Okay, so here if I now refresh my S3 bucket, you can see there's a new file has been saved right here. Okay, so what we did is we have downloaded the data, we have explored the data, and we have transformed a high level transformation of the data set, and we have pushed the data into an S3 bucket. Now let's go ahead and create a simple model training job. Okay, let's go ahead and create the simple model training job. Now, in order to create a simple model training job, I'll say import SageMaker. I think I've done the import already. So first thing that we would need is the region name. So I can just go ahead and get the region name by mentioning as sagemaker.session.boto region name. This will return the region name. And I also require the execution role. So execution role ARN is this. This is my execution role that is assigned for this SageMaker session. Okay. Now, what we will be doing is we would go ahead and create the XGBoost estimator. And here, in order to create this XGBoost estimator, we will make use of the SageMaker estimator class. So I'm going to mention some details like here I'm going to download the rule profile rule configs, and I'm going to import the training input. Here for the location I've mentioned as S3, followed by my bucket which we had mentioned earlier, the prefix and the XGBoost model. And this is where I'll be placing the output, and whatever the training that we perform, that is loading the model will be loaded from the SageMaker as a container. So I'm going to retrieve the XGBoost model using the SageMaker image URIs retrieve. This is going to fetch the container, and then I'm going to create the instance of my estimator. So here I'm mentioning my container, and I want to use one instance. The instance type is ml.m4xlarge. Then the output path is S3 output location, and we'll have to specify the SageMaker session, and we can just mention some profile rules like what are the rules that I want to mention, like a profiler rules. Okay, so these rules where we will specify some of the SageMaker debugger built-in rules. That is what I'm specifying right here. So this is going to create the model instance for us. Then we'll have to set the hyperparameters of the model. So I'm going to set some initial hyperparameters for the model by mentioning as max depth 5, eta as 0.2, gamma as 4. So, and the objective I mentioned as binary, which is logistic because we are dealing with binary classification. And the number of rounds I've mentioned as 1000. Now, once we mention these, then we'll have to mention where exactly is our training data. So in order to mention our training data, I'll import my training input, and this for using this training input object, like I'll create it as a training input object by mentioning the location. See, this is the location that we have already, bucket, prefix, and data slash train, which is basically the complete path of this CSV file that we had pushed earlier. So I'm going to mention my training data and the validation data. Now, once we mention our training data and validation data, the next thing is performing the fit. I'll just go ahead and perform the fit, and this would go ahead and perform the fit, guys. Currently, I've mentioned weight is equal to true so that the training job can actually progress and you can see how exactly it is progressing. You can see the logs. Okay, or else you can say weight as false so that the training job can start in the backend and it will perform the training. Now, once the model is trained, I'll just mention the code so that you'll have it as a reference. So you can go ahead and deploy the model by simply running the command like this, xcp predictor model.deploy, and make use of the CSV serializer and deploy the model. And you can get the endpoint name by calling the model name dot the uh, let me the other code, yeah, to get the endpoint name where the model will be deployed. This is what you can actually run. Okay, so guys, it will take around 15 minutes to complete the model training, because first thing that it has to do is it will go ahead and fetch the image. Okay, then once it fetches the image, it will instantiate a server which is ml.m4xlarge. For this server, it will load the data, that is whatever my training data that I've got, it will load the data to the input path. Then once it loads the data for my input path, then it would go ahead and perform the training using the set hyperparameters. And once the training is completed, then we would get to see currently it is downloading the input data. Okay, it will take a while, so for everything to get completed. All right, guys. So in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll be saving this notebook and I'll share it with you. So I would upload the uh, data over here in the webinars. Give me a second, folks. I'm going to mention as 24 March, AWS Machine Learning Specialty Workshop. Okay, I've just uploaded. Let me share you the link right away. So you can access the file using this webinar recordings in Manifold AI Learning page. So there's a Manifold AI Learning Workshops page, and over here you can see that I've just added a file that is SageMaker demo under this 24 March. And once the session is completed, you can also access the session's recording over here. Let me share you the link over here in the chat window so that you can access this notebook copy which we have just built. So I'm sharing the link over here in all the windows that we have got. And I'll also share you in the email as well once the session is completed. But yeah, you can go over here and access it right away, folks. Okay, this is how you can access the code that I have just created. So let's come back and let's check what is the current status of the training. So now it has downloaded the input data. Now it is downloading the training image. Remember, I've mentioned that it will make use of an image. It is downloading the training image. Once it is completed, it would go ahead and place the data in a certain folder. Then it would go ahead and start performing the training. Okay. So it is uploading the generated training model. It will take a while to perform all these things, guys. And the best part is once the training is happening, when you come back into the SageMaker, and if you look for the jobs, okay, under the trainings, if I look into the training jobs, so this is the job that I have created just now. It has been completed. So you can check the model progress over here under the training jobs inside the SageMaker service. You can get to see about other information by going inside the logs. So guys, this was about how you can perform the model training inside this AWS SageMaker and how to perform the training. And then what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to deploy it to an endpoint. So here for deploying to the endpoint, I'm using the ml.t2.medium and I'm trying to deploy it to the endpoint. And once it is deployed, we can create a Lambda function which connects to this endpoint, and we can just create a simple like API gateway which will connect to that Lambda function, and you can generate the responses. That's how easy it is in order to deploy the machine learning models to the production using the Amazon SageMaker. And that is the expectation from your learning journey in the AWS Certified Machine Learning Specialty Certification. All right, guys. So here to help you progress in the learning journey. So in case if you have liked the webinar content, if you liked my way of teaching, so I highly recommend you to check out the course from Manifold AI Learning, which is AWS Certified Machine Learning Specialty Examination Preparation course. So this course is available on marketplaces like Udemy, and it is available on Manifold AI Learning site as well. So this course has got more than 30 plus hours of learning content which covers everything which you would require for your examination preparation, which covers each and every domain that we have talked about. Like domain 1 data engineering, there's a dedicated section for domain 2, and domain 3, domain 4, there are separate sections for each and every topic, so that you get the most in your learning journey and you can prepare yourself for the AWS certification examination. And as I mentioned, this is also available in the marketplaces like Udemy. So this course is being liked by thousands of learners across the globe, and this is one of the uh, like best rated courses which has got more than 4.6 ratings, and it is being referred by more than 1,000 learners in Udemy and more than 5,000 learners in the Manifold AI learning platform. I highly recommend you to check out this course and register yourself and use it in your learning journey. I'm sure you would find it useful. Okay, I'll be sharing you the link, both the links in the chat window in case if you're interested to progress further in the learning journey. I welcome you to try out, guys. So both the platforms, Udemy platforms and the Mindful AI Learning, so provides the 30 days, no questions asked refund policy. So there's no risk for you to try out and use it in your learning journey. Okay, so guys, thank you so much, everyone, for joining in on this session and main importantly, interacting with me and asking some of the amazing questions. I hope you found this session useful. If you have got any questions, please feel free to let me know in the chat window. If you have joined through the webinar, if you want me to unmute you, please do let me know, guys, and I can unmute you as well in case if you want to speak. And if you have joined through the social media platform, yeah, you can also post your questions in the chat window. I'll be answering those questions, folks. Okay, so thank you so much again, guys. So let me share you the link of the Udemy. So in case if you're trying to join through Udemy, you can also check out the link that I have pasted right now in the chat window to join in the Udemy marketplace too. Okay, so thank you so much again, guys. Okay, I see a few questions here. So Piyush says we can use any open source models here, right? Like the Hugging Face. That's correct. That's a good question, Piyush. So here, this is connected to the internet, so you can make use of a TensorFlow library. Like you can actually install the TensorFlow library and you can start working with Hugging Face. And in the SageMaker Studio, we have another option called Jumpstart where you can directly load the Hugging Face model. Like for example, I'll select this Hugging Face. I can select which is the model that I want to load. And from here, I can directly click on this deploy so that we can directly deploy the existing model from the Hugging Face. So we have all the flexibilities that is with us. So the flexibility that you have got while working in local environment, along with the flexibility you have the ability to ability to have more control by by creating your own instances and get the benefit of cloud and the integration with other AWS services. And there's a question from Raghu. Raghu says that from the developer perspective, it looks good. How can the end user see it? So the way that you can think about it from the end users is, okay, so here once you deploy the service, let me just take you through the part which you are asking. So once the developers develop this, so uh, you will be able to create an API gateway. Now this API gateway can be connected to the front end. Okay. Now once it is connected to the front end, so the front end is where the users would interact. They will send in the request, and using that request, you would go ahead and process that request using this background. So I'm trying to see if I have got that content rightly like directly available with me. So here you're specifically asking about, okay, so it's I'm unable to locate it, but yeah. So the I like just to give you an idea when we talk about the deployment, I think somewhere we have covered it here. So just I don't want to waste the time. So just want to reconfirm. We will be creating as an API gateway. We'll be exposing the model as an API. The front end application is what the users will be interacting with, and using that front end, we'll be able to serve those requests. So that's how we will be working, Raghu. Okay, thank you, Piyush. Okay, so Piyush, do you want to speak? or let me know if you want to speak. I can allow you to unmute you because you have raised the hand. Okay, thank you, Piyush. Okay, any other questions, folks? Okay. So team, if you do not have any further questions, if you are good to close the call, please confirm by typing as all good. And thank you so much again, guys, for joining in for this workshop on AWS Certified Machine Learning Specialty Examination. Now, if you like the content or if you want me to take you through further part of this preparation, so please feel free to let me know in the comment section or in the chat window right now so that we can plan more on the upcoming session. Okay, so thank you so much, guys, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. Okay, okay, is it is more demanding. Uh, so Raghu, so here the reason it is in more demand because okay, so here this is a skill set which not only measures your the development part, but also on the deployment, that is on the overall ML flow. So that's the reason I would say it's one of the most demanding skill set that we have got right now. So more or less, you are taking care of the machine learning and the machine learning operations using the AWS cloud. And how much time do you need to prepare? So depending on your flexibility size. So I personally took 1 month for preparation when I prepared long time back, but it's up to you depending on your flexibility and depending on your time that is available to you. So I'll say 1 to 2 months is enough for you to prepare if you are someone has got some basic idea of Python and working with ML algorithms. Okay, so thank you so much again, guys. Thank you, Sai. So I'll see you next time. Take care.